Shoyu Ramen. Shoyu Ramen is basically the starting point of modern Japanese ramen. Noodles actually showed up in Japan way earlier around the 1400s, but they were more of a niche thing for monks and the upper class. Ramen didn't really become popular until 1910, when a shop called Rai-Rai-Ken opened in Tokyo. It had Chinese chefs mixing Cantonese noodle techniques with Japanese flavors. That mix created what we call now Tokyo-style ramen, with a clear brown broth flavored by soy sauce. Back then, it was called Chinese noodles. The place got huge, serving thousands of bowls a day, and basically kicked off ramen's first big boom in Tokyo. Shoyu means soy sauce, which is the basis of the broth. It's made by gently simmering, not boiling hard, so it stays clean instead of turning cloudy. Usually, it's built from chicken and pork bones, plus things like ginger, garlic, and green onions. Then comes the soy sauce base, which is often mixed with things like mirin, sake, and umami ingredients like kelp or dried fish. The final taste is salty but balanced, with a little sweetness and a deep savory flavor. The noodles in a classic shoyu bowl tend to be thin, wavy, and slightly curly, which is partly functional. Tokyo tap water is relatively alkaline, and noodle makers historically used water from the area, which gave the noodles a springy, firm texture. Shoyu ramen remains the benchmark of elegance and balance, representing a century of refinement in the heart of Tokyo's culinary landscape. Miso ramen. Miso ramen is actually one of the newest main ramen styles, only becoming popular across Japan around the 1960s. It comes from the north. Hokkaido, Japan's northernmost main island, is cold for a good chunk of the year, and the food there reflects that. Miso ramen was born in Sapporo in the 1950s, when a restaurant owner named Morito Omiya at a place called Aji no Sanpei accidentally served a customer a sample of miso-flavored broth, and the reaction was so good that he eventually formalized it into a proper menu item. By the 1960s, Sapporo miso ramen had spread across Japan and was being marketed nationally as a regional specialty. The miso tare is stirred into a rich stock, usually pork-based or chicken-based, and the result is thick, opaque, and deeply savory. Miso is a fermented soybean paste, and depending on the variety used, the broth can range from nutty and mild with white miso to earthy and intense with red miso, to something robustly funky with a blended version. Most Sapporo-style shops use a combination. The broth has a weight to it in terms of flavor density, it coats the mouth and lingers. The ramen usually uses thick, curly noodles that are a bit chewy. The shape helps grab onto the rich soup so you get more flavor in every bite. Toppings often reflect what is common in Hokkaido, like corn, butter, and bean sprouts. Adding butter or lard actually helps keep the soup hot for longer, even in sub-zero temperatures. Tonkotsu ramen. Tonkotsu ramen is rich, opaque, almost milky in color, and built on a broth that results from boiling pork bones at a roiling boil for anywhere from 6 to 18 hours. That process breaks down the collagen in the bones and emulsifies fat into the liquid, creating a broth so thick it clings to the spoon. The flavor is porky, savory, and deeply umami-forward. It originated in Fukuoka, a city on the island of Kyushu in southern Japan, sometime in the late 1940s. The most popular origin story centers on a street food vendor who allegedly began selling the soup from a cart at Hakata Station. The Hakata district of Fukuoka became so associated with this style that tonkotsu ramen is still often called Hakata ramen. The broth style spread quickly through Kyushu before eventually going national. The noodles are thin and straight, which is a deliberate choice. In a broth this heavy, thick noodles would make the whole bowl feel like a meal you can't finish. Thin noodles cut through the richness and keep each bite lighter than you might expect. Toppings are kept minimal in the traditional version. Chashu pork, green onions, a strip of nori, sesame seeds, and often pickled ginger on the side to cleanse the palate. Many Hakata shops operate on a kaidama system, where once you finish your noodles, you can order a fresh serving dropped directly into your remaining broth for a small extra charge. Many of the original Hakata ramen shops were small, fast turnover stands and are known for their speed and informality. You sit down, you order, it arrives quickly, you eat fast, and you leave. The broth takes hours to make, but the eating takes minutes. Blue ramen. The most famous version of blue ramen comes from Kipushi, created by Chef Koizumi. His dish is a clear chicken ramen that's bright blue. He got the idea from the turquoise color of the ocean in Hawaii, which makes it stand out from the usual brown or beige ramen. When it first went viral around 2017, it became a symbol of this newer neo-ramen style. The blue comes from the butterfly pea flower, a plant native to Southeast Asia, whose petals produce a vivid naturally blue pigment when steeped in hot water. Butterfly pea flower has been used for centuries in Thai, Vietnamese, and Malay cooking, mainly in rice dishes and drinks. The broth base itself varies by shop, but is often a lighter chicken or shio-style stock, chosen specifically because it won't muddy the color. The blue hue only works against a pale broth. It's basically a clean, light chicken ramen similar to shio style. The flavor is savory and simple, focused on good quality chicken. The noodles even take on a slight blue color, and they stay chewy like regular ramen. Instead of heavy pork slices, it uses soft chicken breast, which fits better with the lighter broth. There's also a color change trick some versions use. Adding a squeeze of citrus, typically lemon or lime, causes the blue to shift toward purple or even pink, due to the pH sensitivity of the pigment in the flour. Shoyu Ramen. Shoyu means salt, and Shoyu Ramen is the purest, most technically demanding of all the main styles. The broth is clear, often golden or very faintly colored, and the seasoning comes from a carefully crafted salt tare rather than soy sauce or miso. Because there's nothing to hide behind, the quality of the stock is completely exposed. A weak stock makes a weak bowl. There's no fermented depth from miso, no soy sauce umami to prop things up. It's just the bones, the water, the aromatics, and the salt. It's considered by many ramen historians to be the oldest of the 4 canonical styles. The most commonly cited origin point is Hakodate, a port city in Hokkaido where Chinese traders brought noodle soup dishes in the late 19th century. Because the early versions were relatively simple, seasoned mainly with salt and built on chicken or seafood stock, they get credited as a prototype for what ramen became. Hokkaido Shoyu Ramen remains a point of regional pride, and the local style typically uses chicken or seafood as the base, with a broth that's almost completely transparent. The noodles used are usually thin and straight, which suits the delicacy of the broth. Toppings tend to be white fish cake, thin slices of pork, bamboo shoots, green onions, and sometimes a drizzle of flavored oil, often chicken or sesame, to add a little body. Some modern shops use yuzu oil or shrimp oil for a layer of aromatic complexity. The salt tare alone can be a complex formula. Some shops blend sea salt with kombu dashi, dried fish, or fermented ingredients to create a tare with more dimension than a straight salt solution. The craft is in the subtlety, and eating a great shoyu bowl slowly reveals layers you wouldn't have predicted from the clean, unassuming surface. Lemon ramen. Lemon ramen emerged from the broader wave of experimental and regional ramen development that accelerated in Japan during the 1990s and 2000s, as shops began pushing beyond the 4 classical styles. The defining element is citrus, usually actual lemon juice or lemon zest incorporated into the broth or tare, which gives the bowl a bright acidic lift that feels almost foreign in the context of traditional ramen. The base is almost always shoyu or a light chicken stock, because a heavy broth would fight the lemon rather than carry it. The acidity needs space to register. What you get is a broth that's savory but also bright, with a freshness that cuts through the usual richness. It's one of the few ramen styles where you finish a bowl and feel lightened rather than weighted. Some versions add yuzu in place of or alongside lemon, which gives the citrus note a more floral Japanese character. Lemon ramen often goes with chicken tempura, which adds some crunch and richness that works well with the sour broth. Other versions might use poached chicken, bean sprouts, or fresh greens to keep that clean, fresh feeling. The noodles are usually medium thin and straight, so they don't feel too heavy and mix well with the light soup. The sourness makes the broth feel less oily, the smell of the lemon gets stronger with the heat, and it can even make the soup taste saltier without adding more salt. The cold lemon slices against the hot broth also add a small contrast in temperature. Tsukemen. Tsukemen, or dipping noodles, is a different kind of ramen, where the noodles and soup are served separately instead of everything in one bowl. This style started in 1961 with Kazuo Yamagishi, a famous ramen chef in Tokyo. The idea actually came from a simple staff meal. He noticed his workers dipping cold leftover noodles into hot soup so they could eat faster and stay cool in the summer. He saw potential in it, improved the recipe, and put it on the menu. The dipping broth is deliberately intense, far saltier and richer than a regular ramen broth, because it's built to season noodles rather than to be consumed in volume. The most common version is a thick pork and fish-based broth, with a strong hit of dried bonito or mackerel. Some versions are spicy. Some shops serve the broth boiling hot to compensate for the room temperature noodles. The noodles themselves are usually thick and chewy, with more body than a standard ramen noodle, which helps them hold up to repeated dipping without falling apart. It opened the door for stronger, heavier flavors that would be too intense in a normal bowl of ramen. Over time, shops started pushing this even further, making thicker broths and bigger noodles, turning tsukemen into its own major ramen style. Tantanmen. Tantanmen is a direct Japanese adaptation of dan-dan noodles, the Sichuan dish of wheat noodles served in a spicy sesame and chili sauce, topped with minced pork. When Chinese immigrants brought the dish to Japan, Japanese cooks transformed it into a soup-based version, adding broth to a dish that was originally much drier and saucier. The defining flavors are sesame and spice. The broth is usually built on a chicken or pork stock base, but gets its character from a tare made of sesame paste, chili oil, and soy sauce. The result is a broth that's nutty, warm with heat, and slightly thick from the sesame. Some versions lean heavily into the sesame to the point of tasting almost like a peanut sauce thinned into soup form. Others balance the sesame with enough chili that the heat is very dominant. Almost every version uses ground pork that's been stir-fried with a fermented chili bean paste as the main topping. Tantan-men arrived in Japan in the 1950s through the network of Chinese restaurants in major cities, particularly in Yokohama's Chinatown, and it spread through regional ramen shops over the following decades. Dandan noodles in China are usually served with very little liquid, heavily spiced, and built more around the Sichuan peppercorn's numbing effect than sesame. Japanese tantan-men is usually milder and soupier. Maze soba. Maze soba, sometimes called Taiwan maze soba, is a pretty new kind of ramen that has no broth. It started in 2008 at a small shop called Menya Hanabi. The owner was trying to make Taiwan ramen, which is a Nagoya dish with spicy mincemeat and soup, but he couldn't get the broth right. He was about to throw away the meat when a part-time worker suggested putting it on top of the noodles instead. That simple idea ended up creating a whole new style that spread across Japan, then to other parts of Asia and even the US. The flavor profile depends entirely on the tare and the toppings. The tare is usually a soy sauce-based sauce enriched with lard or a flavored oil and seasoned with garlic. When mixed into the hot noodles, it coats every strand with a glossy, savory layer. The toppings typically include ground pork, menma bamboo shoots, nori, green onions, chili flakes, dried fish flakes, and a raw egg yolk, which breaks during mixing and adds a custardy richness to the whole thing. Some versions even include cheese because the fat in the cheese plays a similar role to the egg. The noodles in maze soba are thick and chewy, and because there's no broth to thin things out, the texture of the noodles itself becomes the main focus. You want something with real bite that can carry the sauce without turning to mush. After finishing the noodles, most shop owners offer takuwan gohan, which is a small scoop of rice placed into the remaining sauce at the bottom of the bowl and mixed in. Every last bite of tare gets absorbed into the rice and eaten so nothing is wasted. Maze soba got popular really fast. It went from one small shop in Nagoya to hundreds of places in just a few years. People like the stronger flavors and more hands-on food where you mix everything yourself.